All right, everybody. Thank you for being so patient with me as we get started. My name is Ashley, and this is the crash course on coping. I'm so excited to be here tonight for what I'm now going to be calling our community care workshops. These are spaces in which we are providing information in an accessible and relevant way for the Black and Brown communities. And so this is how we keep care going in our community in that regard. So let's go ahead and get started with some reminders. So drop in the chat over here on the right side of the screen. I have a chart from -10 all the way to +10, and let me know where you're feeling right now in this moment. So just take a moment, see if any of these words resonate with you or where you just feel today, and drop a number in the chat for where you're at and how you're feeling right now. Right now, I think I'm feeling a bit of like a uncomfortable anxiety because I don't like starting late. So I'm feeling like a 1 and I'm hoping to inch up from there. I have some 1s, we have a 2. Absolutely. We got a 5, we got a -1. Yeah, word. We have a 2. Feeling like a mix of the things? Yeah, absolutely. So that's real feedback and being like, I feel a little bit of a -3 and a 7 and a 4 and a 0, and all the things can be felt at the same time. So I definitely hear that feeling like a +1. Cool. So as we kind of take stock of where we're at today, this space is here for you. As always, and I will say this over and over till I'm purple and green in the face, do what you need to do to take care of yourself first and foremost. If that means not being here, if that means having this on in the background while you're doing other things, if that means being like, I actually want to go and prioritize this other thing, like do what you need to do to take care of you first. Feel free to engage in whatever way feels comfortable for you. I will be utilizing the chat feature. Again, this is recorded, so some people may not feel comfortable talking, some folks might, but whatever floats your boat. And you can use the chat box to type any questions. I'll make sure that I have it up and I'll be reading through it as we kind of go through our slides. Cool? Cool. So this is a donation-based workshop. Pay what you can. If you can. If you can't, there's no sweat about it. You're still welcomed and valuable to our community. Here are those links to do so. There's Cash App, Venmo, Zelle. Also in my link tree, there is a specific button that you can use, all with Altruistic Ash. I will type that on the chat for our friends because it can be a word to spell for everything. Okay, the suggested donation for this workshop is $15 to $25 if you can. Here's our flow for today. We're gonna do a little bit about meeting me. We're gonna talk about what is stress and what are coping skills. We'll get some foundational information there. We'll talk about the different types of coping skills and how to use them. Then we'll talk a little bit more about adaptive and maladaptive coping. We'll talk about what do you do when you get stuck? Because I feel like very often we'll have these skills, we'll have things that we're using, and then we'll get to a point and we're like, this doesn't work anymore. So what do you do at that point? We'll take a little bit of time at the end of today to practice, and then we'll bounce out of here. Sound like a plan? Okay. And no sweat. I appreciate it. So this is me. Hi. My name is Ashley. I use they, she, and beloved pronouns. I'm from altruisticash.co, which is a healing space, a co-created healing space for Black and Brown folks to heal in community. I'm fueled by my personal charge to help Black femmes achieve embodied authenticity by providing a safe space to transform pain and hurt into pleasure, power, and healing. I do that with offering individual therapy and counseling, some group programs, which I'm so excited to launch starting next week, and then our community care, our community educational workshops. That's me. Okay, so let's hop right into it. So throw it in the chat for me. What is a coping skill? What do you think a coping skill is? What have you heard about coping skills? What has somebody else told you? What have you seen on Instagram, on TikTok, on Twitter? What is it? A healthy way to process your emotions. Mm-hmm. Coping skills are how you manage your emotions or feelings, and they can be good or bad. Okay. Methods to regulate emotions and actions. Okay. Behaviors to help you adjust to stressors. Yep. Absolutely. So I'd like to start off and get grounded here and ask, like, what is a coping skill and what does stress have to do with it? And I love that someone brought up helping you adjust to stressors. So what is stress? I want to throw it back to you all and say, what is stress? What stresses you out? What do you, when you hear the word stress, like what comes up for you in that way? Drinking my water because I knew we're going to be chatting tonight. Any thoughts on stress? Things that make me feel pressure. Stress is something that knocks me off sync and causes anxiety. Yeah, absolutely. Word. Okay. People say agreed. Yeah. So what is stress? We're going to get grounded in some definitions so we're all working from the same place. I feel like we oftentimes use these words and we don't have a common understanding of them. So we get confused or we use words when we actually mean something else. So I like to give this basic definition of what stress is. So stress is the response for when our systems of managing life are overwhelmed. I'm going to say it again. So stress is the response. It's innately, it is a reaction. It is something that is reactive. When our systems of managing life, the way in which we do things, are overwhelmed, right? And I talk about overwhelmed, I like using the definition of saying anything. So when it's too much, so when there's too much happening at once, when it's happening too fast, when things are going way quicker than you may have anticipated, or too soon, when you may have thought something was coming on down the line, but it's here now. So too much, too fast, too soon. Stress is typically seen as an event, but it can also include our perception of the event and our reaction to the event. So usually when folks talk about stressors, they talk about a distinct, acute thing that happened. I feel stressed because I have to give a really big presentation at work. Stress could also be our perception of something, which is also what anxiety is. It's when we have a perception of something that far outweighs what actually happens. And anxiety is like, well, it's going to be like this, in that regard, and our reaction to the event. And when I say event doesn't necessarily mean big T trauma. Event could be getting into an argument or a disagreement, it could be giving a presentation. It is just to mark a point in time. Okay. So stress is generally seen as negative. And when I say the word negative, we see stress as being debilitating. It decreases our ability to be able to do the things that we wish we could do or would normally typically be able to do. But stress can also be positive, and on the converse side, it can be motivating. So we're not going to get into the specifics around positive stress today, but positive stress could look like feeling really excited about a promotion, but there are things that come with it. It could be feeling really excited about getting married or having a kid, going through a major life transition, which is something that you want, but it can come with a different challenges that may overwhelm our systems. Okay. Does that make sense? Are there any questions about that definition of stress? Does this definition make sense when you kind of see it broken down like this? Or have you heard of stress in different ways? Makes sense. Yeah. Totes my goats. I really like the too much, too fast, too soon. Yeah, I'm going to go back to that piece just really quickly because sometimes it's really hard for us to define what overwhelmed feels like. We just know that it's a lot. Sometimes it can just feel like a lot and there aren't really words to describe it. So breaking it down is saying overwhelmed is being too much of something happening too fast or too soon is a really good, solid way of saying like, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed because there are too many things happening at once, or there's too many emotions that I'm experiencing right now, or things are happening too fast. Like there are things that I was ready for, but I don't know if I'm ready for it, like, or too soon. Like I thought this was great, but I don't know. So that's a way to kind of break down that feeling of overwhelm. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about the stress process, or like how we get to a stress response. I think it's really important, again, to give us some common language and understanding to these things that we very much so hear all the time, but may not necessarily know exactly what they mean. So the stress process really starts here with a stressful event. So again, a stressful event can be negative, which is something that may feel debilitating or decrease your ability to operate at your baseline, or it can be motivating. So a major exam, an important meeting, a financial setback, interpersonal conflict, a car accident, new life challenges or transitions in life that bring challenge, a marriage, a birth of a child. Those are distinct events or things that happen that are stressful. And again, we're not going to get into the complexities of like acute stress versus chronic stress today. Different workshop at a different time, but we will definitely use that. Though some of these things happen at a singular point in time, and some of these things happen over a period of time to adjust, right? So we have the stressful event, then we go into, well, what is the perception of the event? So the thing happened, but how am I seeing the thing? What glasses, what lens, what perspective do I have about it? So a person's perception about the threat, which will be influenced by the familiarity and prior knowledge of the specific event. So our ability to regulate our stress is also in part based on how do we perceive the event, right? Are we perceiving it as something that is positive or motivating, or are we perceiving it as something that's negative or debilitating? Were we familiar, or did we have an idea or an inkling, or were we had prepared in advance for this event or not? That perception of the event is a huge component of how we can manage how our stress is one of the things that we can do. You can't necessarily change stressful events, but you can always work on your perception of something. And sometimes you don't want to because it just fucking sucks. And like, it's okay if it just fucking sucks too. Like, that's all right. So then from that perspective, we have a reaction. And I split the reaction into two specific ways of responding. We respond to the stress in our mind, and we respond to the stress in our body. So for our response to stress in our mind, this is kind of where we get some of that information on like our CBT. So you have a response in your mind, which is your emotions. So what is the emotional response to the perception? What are the thoughts? What are the things that you're telling yourself? What is that repeat track that's going on in your head? when we have the perception of the event, and then what are our behaviors? What are the things that we do as a result of that stress? Okay, so those are all places of intervention as well when we start talking a little bit more about coping skills. And then we talk about the body. So we talk about the nervous system arousal. So where our nervous system gets aroused, our heart starts to beat really fast, our palms get sweaty, our body is kind of activating to go into this fight or flight or freeze or comply. So again, whole nother theory. We don't have time for it today, but that's kind of some of the things that our body's way of responding to the stress. There are also hormonal and neurochemical changes. So our bodies may increase the production of cortisol, which is the stress hormone within our body. And that is the signal to our body to start shutting down certain parts of our body that aren't necessarily needed for survival, and activating the other parts of our body, which is why when you're feeling really stressed out, usually some of the earlier places to kind of get shut down are your digestive system. So you may not feel hungry, or you may not necessarily be processing foods or things in the same way. So usually folks have gastro issues when they're feeling really, really stressed out. And if you exist in this state for a prolonged period of time, the result that happens to your body is like this complete physical exhaustion, right? So cortisol, I believe I was reading a study and that said that cortisol can age the body 3 to 4 times faster the longer that it's in the body system. So if you are feeling stressed out for a month, it's like your body has lived through a quarter, 3 or 4 months out of a year in just that 1 month of being stressed out. So that is the stress process. We're going to transition and talk a little bit more about coping skills. Are there any questions about this stress process? Was this anything that you were familiar with, or does this process make sense? And how do you see how this relates and kind of comes back to you and how you respond to stress in your life? No. Okay.
I was gonna say I didn't want to type because I don't know, it was a lot to say. It's really interesting about like the stress hormone cortisol and how it can shut down your systems. I think that kind of resonated with me when you said it, because it's like, oh wow, not taking care of yourself, eating, drinking, and while you're in that state, it can happen and you won't be thinking about it, and then you continue on a cycle of not taking care of yourself. So yeah, the power of stress, it's interesting. That's why I wanted to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And the power of stress, one of the things that I like to remind people about how our body responds to stress. In the brain, we have our amygdala. That is our reptilian part of our brain. It is responsible for the automatic processes. It's responsible for our nervous system and the automatic processes to keep us alive. Its only job is to keep you safe. So it is constantly scanning your environment to make sure that you're safe. Anything that it perceives as a threat, it will automatically activate those systems. And I think that's the part where people, especially for folks that feel anxiety, like it just feels out of control. Like you could be sitting minding your black ass business, and then all of a sudden, like earlier today, I was sitting and I was meditating and I was getting all settled down, and I had a satchel full of lavender. And for whatever reason, the lavender bag like fell off the table or it moved. And because it happened in my periphery, I like jumped and I was just like, oh, LOL, you just want me to use this for like such and later. But like that was my body thought for whatever reason that it was a mouse, or I don't know, just something that's outside of the normal particular range of what I know it to do and be able to do in that moment. Right. And so I felt my heart started to beat really fast. Like my watch was like, my heart rate shot up. And then I started getting a little sweaty, and then I was just like, okay, my breathing started intensifying. And I was like, all this because this daggone thing just fell off the table. Like, It's like, okay, so, but it's one of those things to kind of recognize for yourself. And the vagus nerve, which I could totally get nerdy about, is a bundle of nerves that goes from your brainstem down to your belly, and they exist in various points all throughout your body. But that is the way that you can use your body to talk back to your brain to reverse engineer and shut that process down, or help that process kind of like go back into safe rest and digest. Um, Maybe that's what we'll do for next month. We'll talk about nervous system regulation. I get really nerdy about this stuff. I feel like sometimes people are just like, that's a little too sciencey for me. But I think it's important in understanding these ways in which our bodies are biochemically wired can help you actually understand, okay, when this thing is showing up for me, this is what I can do to help myself move through that. And one of the most powerful bits of information I've learned is with your vagus nerve, there's a bundle of the nerves that exist in your diaphragm. So if you ever kind of get into that space where your body is fight or flight, taking a deep breath like into your belly and holding that belly as full as you can for as 10 to 15 seconds, it sends whatever compression, it's more to that, but the compression of the nerves allows the body to recognize that it's safe, and that bundle of nerves will send a message back up to the brain to kind of like be like, all right, we're all good actually. And I've actually tested it out because I got into a car accident a few years ago. Driving just made me really like anxious. I would get into the road, people would do crazy things, and I was like, all right, let's try it. And it's so having that knowledge is so powerful, because I knew after that and practicing it for a period of time, like, oh, I can bring myself back. Like, I don't have to exist there. And that's why having coping skills is important, right? You can understand, like, I can't control everything that happens in the world. Unfortunately, that's just not the way that life goes. But I can control how my body reacts and responds, and how comfortable I can exist and be in that space. So that's why we're here today, learning about these coping skills. I will get off of my soapbox, but yes, maybe we'll talk about a little bit of the nerdy stuff. So, what is a coping skill? A coping skill is something that we do to manage our stress. Like our stress response, these skills or tools either target the mind or the body. I also wanted to give additional language use that you might see in the greater conversations. People may say coping skills, they might say coping strategies, coping mechanisms, coping tools, coping interventions, coping exercises, but they're all talking about the same thing. I just think it's important to give that language sometimes, because people are like, well, is it the same? And I'm like, yes, girl, yes. Okay. So when do we use our coping skills? So I broke it down into 3 separate categories. Okay. And with those 3 separate categories, we have category 1, which is problem solving. So is there a specific issue that can be acted upon that would shift the stressor? So is there something that you can do? The follow-up question to that is, do you have the capacity, ability, or desire to do it? We'll get into that in a little bit. The second type of coping skill that you can use, the second category, is looking at that perception, right? So that mind connection part, that thought part, that emotion part, the feelings. Is there an alternative perspective or an alternative feeling that can shift the stressor, right? So kind of looking at it from that perspective, being like, okay, is there a different way that I can look at this that I might have a different reaction or response to? And then the third category is into our body regulation. So just like I was talking about, there are ways in which we can activate and use our physical bodies to help bring that level of stressor down. So what can we do at this moment to bring our body closer to our baseline of energy? Okay, so we'll get a little bit deeper into each of these. All right, so problem solving strategies. So problem solving strategies, the goal of these are efforts to manage or alter the problem that's causing distress. I want to be aware that sometimes there may not necessarily be a thing that you can do, but for those situations where there is something that you can do, there's a different decision that you can make, there is a choice that is available to you. This is what problem solving would be used for, right? So working on solving the problem or the situation. Are you having a conflict with someone at work that is stressing you out? Is there a conversation that you can have? Do you need to get a supervisor involved? What does that actually look like? And that goes to our second point of being able to make a plan for action and then follow up with that plan. Okay. Also, a part of problem solving is avoidance. And I want to talk about avoidance a little bit and distraction as a way as a counterbalance to problem solving. Problem solving is very active. It is an action. It's something that you're doing. Avoidance is the opposite of being like, maybe there is something that you can do, but you don't have the capacity to do it, or you don't have the energy or the authority to make that shift or that change. So avoidance is avoidance is distracting oneself from the stressor. So it's doing something else to take your mind off of it. And that in that moment, that might be what you need, right? And what I like to say is using avoidance for a distinct period of time, I don't think is bad. Using avoidance as your only coping skill and your only mechanism doesn't shift or alter things to change the stressors and bring less or decrease the level of stress. But sometimes you don't have the capacity. Sometimes you don't have the bandwidth. Sometimes you don't have the energy. Sometimes you don't have the care to really address it head on at that point in time. And that's okay. So what can you do to distract yourself? Is there an activity? Is there a conversation? Is there something else that you can do? Again, problem solving is really about action in that regard that will help you distract yourself from the stressor. Okay. Any questions about problem solving? Does anyone use problem solving strategies, or is this like your preferred category of things that you usually go to, or is this your last, category of things that you go to for your coping strategies?
I'm going to talk again. I'm going to say that problem solving is usually my go-to, because usually when I face like an obstacle or a challenge, I usually think, okay, what is within my power to, change this, to change the narrative maybe in my brain, so that it kind of reflects in my outside world, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's kind of the one that I'm most familiar with, not really familiar with the other ones.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. And we'll talk a little bit more about the caveats with perception in just a second. Someone else said, same, Kayla. Someone said problem solving comes last for me. That's real. Like, that's totally real. Sometimes, especially when it comes to having like very visceral emotional responses to things, sometimes you kind of have to wade through the emotions to get to a solid point to be able to be like, okay, now I actually have the capacity, or I have the brain bandwidth to think outside of just feeling the feeling or being in it. And that's real. Like, some people experience it in that way, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just taking all this information to understand, like, okay, there might be a way to solve this, or there may be a solution, or there may not, and being able to look at it from all these different angles. So speaking about changing perception, so we have your thoughts and your emotion strategies. So this is really all about expressing feelings or engaging in emotional releasing activities, so cathartic activities. And it's also looking at finding meaning and understanding with what's going on, right? So the first part of that is really to get in touch with your feelings and letting them out. So emotion identification is really, really, really helpful for folks, and being like, okay, this is what I'm feeling right now. Sometimes for folks that doesn't necessarily look like a direct feeling or emotion word. That can look like a number and being like, this is where my energy is residing. It's low, medium, high. It's from 0 to 10, it's from positive 10 to negative 10, but really just saying like, this is where I'm at, kind of like what we did earlier on today. And what feels comfortable to me and how can I get closer to that comfort level, right? So that is a way of getting in touch with your feelings and letting them out. Letting them out can also look like talking to someone else, whether that be a friend, a mental health professional, whether that be to the internet. I don't know about you, that might be your business, that might be your jam. So talking to someone about your feelings, and what that does is it gives you the opportunity to get support, sympathy, and understanding from another person. I've been reading this book by Brene Brown called Atlas of the Heart, which we're gonna have a whole group on next year, because we don't know about our emotions, and the way that the words that this human uses to express and understand and define emotions just is so so resonant. But she was saying in one of her chapters that silence, secrecy, and isolation breeds disconnection, right? It breeds like this, it breeds this feeling of feeling alone. It breeds feeling unwanted, unworthy, unlovable. And the antithesis of that is compassion, connection, and understanding. So that's why it's important to have community. And even if that community doesn't necessarily look like a whole 30 people, it can look like 1 or 2 people that you have a close relationship with, or a mental health professional, or a crisis line, whatever you need in that moment.
Mhm.
And what's up, Tiff?
Oh, I just wanted to add, thank you for saying that, because when I read like the problem solving part, my mind went to, I'm always problem solving. Like I'm always trying to do it. And then I'm just kind of learning that I can invite people in to help. I can delegate, I can speak up and say, hey, how would you solve this? So I'm still getting used to that, but that's what I was thinking about. So I'm so glad you said that, like community, just that helps you de-stress.
Yes.
So
First
thank
of
you.
all, like, we are not meant to do life alone. Like, we were literally not designed in that way. So it is really, really important that we have community. And again, like, community does not have to look like 30, 40 people or 15 or no, community are those close, intimate relationships, whether those be platonic, romantic, familial, whatever have you, like whatever constellation that looks like for you. But that is what's most important. Like, you don't have to do life alone. And for some folks, who may be watching this, you may not have those people, or you may not feel like you have connection to like that group of people just yet. And if you don't, I always recommend start with the mental health professional. You pay them to be there, or somebody paying them to be there. And that's a great place to start to get that support while you're bolstering your support group with finding other folks who are like-minded or who can support you in that way. So yeah. But lastly, so not seeking to put a positive interpretation on the problem. We're not silver lining this hoe, okay? Like, it is important in certain instances, like that might be helpful, but as a singular, solitary, the only way of looking at things, it's not. Sometimes, like, there is no positive spin. Like, it just sucks. I think it's important to be like, no, like, this actually just sucks. And like, I don't like it, and I don't have to like it, or you don't have to silver lining it to try and like it in that regard. But just because you don't like something, you can still accept it for what it is and figure out what am I looking to learn, or what am I looking to gain from this situation? And having that perspective can help shift your brain from a place of being like, these are things that are just happening to me, to being like, okay, this is happening. It is what it is. And what am I getting from this? What can I get from this? And what can that look like? Is there a lesson that I'm supposed to learn? Has this come up before? And is there something that I may have missed the last time around when I didn't necessarily look at it in this way, or I was avoiding it at that point in time? So again, we're not trying to silver lining it, but really seeing like, for example, like, they're cutting my job. So like my job is getting cut. Like that is just the truth of the situation. That is the fact of what's going on. So what do I need to learn, or like, what can I gain? What other opportunities are available to me? And this is allowing sometimes those glasses that might look like this to start to widen up and be like, okay, there may be other things that I can look at, or maybe, I can start looking over here. I can turn to look over at this side and seeing like what's available to me there. So yeah, those are some thought or perspective and emotion shifting strategies, and kind of like what that looks like. Do folks primarily lean to using these strategies, or not so much? Or is this like a tough place for folks to kind of use some of those coping skills?
I think in this kind of category, my go-to is the last one, where it's like, it says not seeking to put a positive interpretation on that problem. I feel like I've been stuck in a cycle of trying to see things in a light and positive way. Like, oh, this is happening, be grateful for it, it's happening for you, stuff like that. And you're right, it doesn't work for everything, but I've been trying to make it work for everything. But I haven't quite found a way to get out of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's real. And I appreciate you for saying that. And there's a difference between looking at things from like the greater context of like, it's all happening for a reason. I watch Manifest. Manifest is a great show. It's on Netflix. They just had their last season. And like the little kid always used to say like, everything is happening for a reason. And like, at first it was a little scary, but I was like, yeah, no, it was kind of right. Like or he's saying it's all connected. That's what he was saying. It's all connected. It's all connected. And sometimes in being in the middle of it, it's really, really hard to see how things are connected together and why and how they work in that way. And that's why they say hindsight is 2020. Usually looking back, you can see like, oh, like this opportunity or this situation came to do this so that I could do X, Y, and Z later. But usually in the thick of it, you can't project what's going to happen moving forward. So it's kind of hard sometimes to interpret that. So I totally understand that. But yeah, you don't have to silver lining everything. If it sucks, let it suck. Be with people that allow you to let it suck. Even if it's, like, allow it to suck for as long as you need it to. Don't get stuck there, but like allow it to suck. Like being like, no, this is crap. I don't like this. And being like, no, that's okay. That's cool. Like you can exist there. Lastly are some body regulation strategies. So these are the things that you do to center and ground your body back into the present. And we're going to get into a modulation activity where we can modulate up and down. Oh, someone dropped in the chat. I am trying to learn how to be more in tune with my feelings and letting them out instead of burying them and moving on quickly to make others feel comfortable. That I feel everyone's head is nodding like, yup. I think specifically as Black femmes, like we have this expectation implicitly or explicitly that we're supposed to hold everything for everyone else. And then there's no container for us to hold or for us to be held in that way. So we're just like, well, I guess no, if nobody can hold it, then oh well, like I guess then I'm just gonna ignore it until it comes back up again. And then that time it's bigger and bigger and bigger until sometimes it blows, or until we just stuff it deeper, 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 deeper down. Right. So I definitely feel like people resonate with that. And I don't think that you're alone in that, but it's all about taking those small steps to release the pressure a little bit and be like, let me just try letting this out, or let me try just identifying and communicating this, or let me just see, what does it feel like to just sit with this emotion that I'm feeling for 10 minutes? Like, what does it actually feel like to feel that in my body? And what does that feel like in that moment? Right. So, and that kind of taps into our body regulation strategies. What does it look like to slow down and observe what's happening both around you and within you? I think in the worlds that we live in, it's so easy to be overstimulated. It's so easy to be overconnected. You got, your microwave going off. You got your Alexa talking to you. You got your phone pinging with all these different numbers. You got email chimes, and there's so much noise, like both literal and like metaphorical noise that is just happening in and around us so much. So what would it look like for you to slow down and to get still and to get quiet? In my personal practice, that's where I found clarity. It also was really scary at first because I feel like if you're not familiar with that practice, it's kind of like, well, what's going to come up? Like if I sit with insert emotion here, like what is actually going to happen? Like sometimes there's that fear of, I don't really know exactly what's going to go down, so I don't want to do it in that regard. So that can be like a stretch point for some folks too. Secondly, you can breathe and use breath work to support your modulation, which means the movement of energy. And you can modulate your energy up, or you can modulate your energy down, or you can modulate to sustain or keep it the same. But if you ever hear the word modulation, that's what it means. It means the movement, the modulating, the movement of energy. And then move your body. I will say it 1,000 times over and over again, exercise is the best free medicine that you can give yourself. We were talking a little bit earlier about cortisol, and I'm going to shift that. Instead of saying exercise, I'm going to say movement is the best free medicine that you can give your body, because exercise isn't always accessible or desirable depending on conditioning and thoughts around it. But moving your body is the best free medicine that you can give yourself. 20 minutes of movement a day will give your body technically the prescription is 20 minutes 3 times a week. And just actually giving yourself that movement, whether it looks like a walk, whether it looks like stretching, whether it looks like yoga, whether it looks like aerobic exercises. So swimming, biking, hiking, running, or even like fast breath work can also be counted as aerobic exercise as well. Anything that's energizing and builds your cardiovascular and lung capacity. And then you have anaerobic exercise, which is your strength training, which is your weightlifting and things of that nature. So moving your body in ways that feels good. That could also just look like dancing. That could also look like cleaning. That could also look like playing with your pets or children. That could also look like, instead of taking the elevator, taking the stairs. Like there are very practical ways that you can integrate this into your world that doesn't have to look like another thing for you to do if you don't have the capacity to add something else to your schedule. So yeah, those are some body regulation strategies, and we are going to do a modulation practice as a part of this workshop today. But anybody else use any body regulation strategies?
I'm going to say that I really liked that you brought up dancing and cleaning being options for movement, because, cleaning, it kind of shifted the perception of that being a chore, right? I'm like, oh, wow, I can just get up, maybe set a timer for 30 minutes and tidy up the kitchen. I'll feel better afterwards. I've done my movement, things like that. So I think that's a really good seed. So thank you for that.
And the only reason, so I never, a couple of years ago, if you would have asked me if cleaning was exercise, I would have been like, no, it's not exercise. What are you talking about? Have you ever deep cleaned a bathroom on a hot day? I promise you working, you are getting a workout. And I was like, no, this is exercise. And now that I wear a watch that those oven cleanings, yes, you put in that elbow grease and try to bust up the stick. Yes, so though cleaning is exercise, and if you wear a watch or a Fitbit or anything that tracks movement in that way, you'll see like my watch will start to say like, it'll come up and be like, are you working out? Because like your heart rate has been elevated for like the last 10 minutes. Like, what are you doing? And so that was something that helped really shift my perspective. Like, oh, like even folding the laundry, which is something that you would think is so minute, like it uses up energy and it actually increases your heart rate because you're moving. in that regard. So don't discount the things that aren't the Instagram fit girlies are doing at the gym. And no, like we want to move our bodies. We want to be able to use our bodies in ways that feel good for us. And that doesn't look like the same thing for everybody. And it's important to have accessible practices because not everybody can run. Not every, like I had a cardiovascular event earlier this year and like I couldn't run, I couldn't weight lift. So I really had to shift like what does movement actually look like in ways that don't elevate my heart rate so much that it becomes distressful or not helpful, not calming in that regard. So really starting to think about like what are alternatives and practices that you can use if the things that you're used to doing don't work or don't feel good. Nature walks. I love nature. I love walking. I live across the street from a park now, so I've been enjoying really just walking. Back during the pandemic, I would literally walk around my block. One time before I would come home for the day because I didn't have a commute anymore. So like at the end of my workday, I would like leave my house and walk around the block and come back home. And that was a way of helping me like reground. Earthing, nature bathing, love it. I love it. All right, so we're going to talk about when to use coping skills. I think we have just a couple of slides left and we should be done probably in like the next 30 minutes, okay? So when to use your coping skills. I feel like this is a question that folks often have. It's like, all right, I have this list. I have this list of these things that I feel like work for me, but how do you actually organize that in a way that is meaningful and can be actionable? We also had a whole workshop talking about a coping skills toolkit last month that you can find available on YouTube as well. If you're interested in that, we can definitely do that too. For me, but this is a shortened version of that or isolated version of that. And I break it down into 4 separate categories. So what are your advanced preparation strategies? This is useful. So these are the category of things that you can do that are useful when anticipating entering something that you know is going to be stressful. The holidays are just around the corner. Some people have Hallmark families. I do not. So there are certain things that I need to do before entering into certain people's homes to make sure that like I'm good in that regard, right? So when you're anticipating entering something that you know already is stressful, what can you do to help regulate yourself or bring yourself as close to calm as you can while walking into it, right? So when practiced routinely, these keep anticipatory anxieties down. It can support planning and preparation, and it can help engage in strength and proactively addressing needs. So these are the things that you do beforehand. If caveat here, if you can anticipate it happening, okay? The majority of things within your coping skills list are going to be your in the moment strategies. So these are useful for moment to moment management of intense arousal. So these are things that you can use when you've thought about them and you prepared for them before, or when life be life and it's just kind of like, boop, okay, here's this thing. What's up? Were you going to do it or what? At that point in time. Right? So these support the management of intense arousal, affect, or unexpected distress when you weren't expecting something to happen or you did. The goal of these strategies is to help move through the challenging moment without getting to the place where you are so overwhelmed by it that you can't manage and at all. Sometimes you will be able to do that. Sometimes, especially in the beginning when you're practicing those things, you might still become overwhelmed, and that's okay. That's okay. That's what practice is for. That is what life is for. It's all one big practice in the whole first place. So that's what the practice is for. Okay. So then we have recovery strategies. So after a challenging situation these are the things that you do for stress relief. I like to say that if you are a person who works a job, you need to be having recovery strategies every day. Highly recommend your first 60 minutes home of your day be for you. I don't give a care if you have, well, I do care if you have children or other responsibilities, I do, but that first 60 minutes really should just be for you. doing whatever you feel like, whatever you need to kind of take care of yourself and pour back into yourself after giving to the world. So recovery strategies support moving through emotions rather than allowing challenging situations to dictate emotional responses after the situation is over. So recovery strategies can be used with advanced prep if you know about it or not. Definitely, if you have something that you're using in the moment, you're going to want to use a recovery strategy on the back end of that. And then ongoing self-care and maintenance, right? So these are used to support a comfortable level of arousal, increase well-being, and decrease stress over time. These strategies help to better equip yourself and manage difficult situations as they arrive. So these are the things that you are doing on a routine basis, whether it be daily, weekly, monthly, annually, quarterly, yearly, whatever have you. These are the things that you are regularly doing because you know that they help you maintain a level of wellness. Okay, so give me some ideas. Have you thought about things in this framework before? Do you have things that, oh, I never thought about this, but anytime that I'm in a stressful or anytime I think about something stressful, like this is what I do?
I'm gonna put something out there. I don't know what category it belongs in. But I like had really bad anxiety ever since I was a teenager. And something that's been helping me is actually lavender essential oil. I would dab it on and just kind of breathe in. And yeah, that kind of gives me clarity in the moment to move forward. So I guess that would be the in the moment kind of strategy.
You got it. That's exactly what it is. It's a perfect example. Thank you so much for sharing. Anyone else want to share? I can give an example. So, I do a lot better when I can anticipate a stressor. Someone said meditation is a recovery strategy for them. Absolutely. You took mine, man. No, it's fine. But usually when things I can prepare for them, I'm usually really good and I don't need anything else after the fact. But some of my in the moment strategies are that deep breath. I also really love grounding things in my hand. So I have like at my desk, I have a stress ball and a palm stone that I use that are kind of just certain things that are helpful for me in the moment. My favorite recovery strategy lately is laying down with my feet up a wall. I put like a pillow under my bum and it just, I don't know, something about that just feels so daggone good. And I will just lay there upside down for about 5 to 10 minutes. And usually after that, like my body just feels so relaxed. So I really love that as a recovery strategy. And a part of my ongoing self-maintenance movement is something that's important for me. And lately I've been doing a lot of biking. And so that has been my thing that I try to do at least three times a week. Usually it's one or two, to kind of just support an ongoing place of wellness. So people in the chat were dropping breath work, sleep, and walking. Definitely going to try the wall thing. It's really great. It's super simple. Listening to music is one also. Yeah, Tiffany, what's up?
Oh, I'm trying to figure out where to put it under, but I noticed like with me, maybe it's ongoing. Like I feel like I have to create something like art or something with my hands or writing. Like I feel like when I don't do that, like I had to realize that with myself, I can feel it. Like, oh, I haven't painted in a long time. So I'm not sure where to put that, but that has been one of my strategies.
And I think you bring up a really good point. Like they can exist. These aren't rigid boundaries. These are very dynamic. So you can use something for multiple things, or you can use it for various functions, depending on the situation. You might use it as a recovery strategy, and other times you might use it as a, ongoing maintenance, but they don't have to be solitary. Like things can exist in multiple categories or across categories as well.
Okay, maybe it's flowing like in and out of like all of them.
Absolutely. And I love that creating and like the energy of creating the energy of like giving birth or bringing something into reality is so exciting, and it's very restorative. So kudos to you. I love that.
No, thank you. And I've also gotten into grounding. I love that you mentioned that. Like I've noticed that's so helpful too. Like keeping little things around me. And then I'm sorry, I forget your name, but mentioned the essential oils. Like I'm into that too. Like the scents. Even if I'm taking a lot of calls that day, like I keep like scents around me, and it's so distressing in the moment. So
Absolutely. And that was Kayla who had mentioned the essential oils, but absolutely.
Yes, Kalea. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you for correcting me. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
I love it. Someone also said using their adult coloring book. I love coloring. I don't know when I stopped coloring, but I love it. And I just recently went out and bought brand new colored pencils and markers that sit at my desk. Coloring is a lot of fun. And it's really like, I appreciate it because it's low stakes. Like I feel like sometimes for folks who especially if they create for a living, like they feel very like, well, it has to look like this thing. And like, yeah, man, like I just bust out my coloring book. I like to do mandalas, which are like meditative images that are sometimes in circles. I also have an app on my phone called Free Coloring. Free Coloring, I think is what it's called. Happy Color. And it's like a coloring thing on your phone, but you just tap it. So like it autofills the color for you. It's really nice. They're really simple. And again, like it serves the same function. And again, if I feel like I'm getting like, I have to get it in the line and it has to look exactly like this, then I'm doing that. I'm like, yeah, that feels pretty good. So I'm glad we're coloring. We kind of already did this. So I was usually gonna say like kitchen sink, like what are your favorite or go-to coping skills? I didn't realize when I created my slides that we already did that kind of already back there. But is there anything else that anyone wants to share either in the chat or off mute?
So I know this, I mean, depending on the way I do it, it can typically be helpful so long as I'm doing it to nourish, but I still like a good comfort meal. I think making a comfort meal is something that usually puts me in a space where like I'm able to put myself in the emotions that I want to be in, and it kind of allows me to forget about what happened that day. So usually that might be one of those on the moment type of things.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we'll get a little bit more into adaptive and maladaptive, but I definitely hear you, and sometimes how that can be colored in a particular way for certain people with a specific experience. But there is something that is so beautiful and nourishing and sacred and special about putting your intention and putting the time into like feeding yourself, right? In a world where again, everything is so fast and it's so easy to kind of like miss something, like taking the time to say like, no, I'm going to feed myself, especially as a person who is like chronically missing meals. You know, I am not exempt from this at all. Taking the time to actually cook something and eat and sit down and eat a meal is something that can be super duper nourishing. Thank you for sharing. We got some chats. We said martial arts, to be honest, it's my fave. In the moment, I've been trying inner child reparenting. That's some really deep work. That's a part of like that ongoing maintenance and that self-revelation. I love martial arts. That is definitely aligned with movement. Also, like, we don't be letting our anger out enough. And I really think that that's important. And I don't know if I necessarily want to go and get trained, but the idea of being able to hit a dummy or a bag or something like makes my brain feel good. I like that. We also have puzzles, also naps. Yeah, I love a good puzzle to be able to challenge the mind, to give the mind something to kind of be developed into. We say also naps, but I feel like those just push off problems, but sometimes that's okay. Absolutely. Naps are essential. I am currently reading Rest is Resistance by Trisha Hershey, who is the founder of the Nap Ministry. Naps will save us. It's important. our bodies need time to rest. And just before I hopped on here, I saw a post from a friend of mine. And the way that she explained it was when something isn't working, right? Like if it's a piece of technology or like a car, like what is the first thing that they tell you to do to troubleshoot it? They say to turn it off and turn it back on, right? And she was saying like, why don't we, like, essentially in her post or what she had posted on her story was saying like, why don't we do the same thing? And I was like, that was like mind expanding for me. And I literally just saw it before I hopped on here and I was like, you know what? Absolutely. Like there are definitely times where like, if something isn't working, if something isn't clicking, if something isn't making sense, if we're feeling really stuck, like go rest, go take the time to be away so you can come back with like a fresh space and a fresh brain. Everybody loves martial arts. Kickboxing. I like that one too, you know, pow, pow. A warm drink. Yes. I love teas and tinctures. I've been getting into that lately, and a baby herbalist over here. So like really starting to work with the things that are around us to help our bodies regulate and do the things internally. African dance. Yes to dancing. Smash rooms, rage rooms. Yes. I love a good like axe throwing too. I think it's important. I think it's so important. So I just went online to schedule a session at the Philly Rage Room. But late November is the earliest available. I wanted to go tomorrow. Yes, I definitely understand that. And one of the things that I used to work with kids who had emotional challenges. And one of the things that I would recommend is going and finding, like, if you have like a bunch of couch cushions or pillows, like go and hit a pillow if you need to do that. Or if you have people in your house, because I know sometimes that can be a barrier. Go in your car, turn the music as loud as you can, and like just scream. Like go pull around the corner, maybe go not park right in front of your house or in your driveway, but like go and actually like scream at the top of your lungs, blood curdling, you know, go pull into a parking lot and just give that to yourself. Sometimes our throats chakras be blocked up, man, and like we be feeling all this stuff and we just need to express and release it. And so that is something that is a practice that I like to do. It's very often followed by a lot of crying because usually behind that rage it's still other emotion, but that rage needs to have a space to be expressed. So those are two practices that I use. And someone said they also love herbal teas. Word. Love it. Okay. So candles are soothing too. Oh, yes. We love a good candle. We love a good candle. I love a good smell good. I lit a candle for us before we hopped on. That's still burning to hold our container. Okay, so now we're going to talk about adaptive and maladaptive coping. These are terms that can be really, really abstract. So I try very hard to make things accessible and relevant. So when we say adaptive, think about what are things that are helpful? What are things that get us closer to feeling how we want to feel? Things that help us move forward or help us move closer towards the goal or understanding in that regard, right? So adaptive coping can help reduce stress and minimize anxiety, even when things are challenging or even in the middle of not necessarily having something that you can do to solve it, right? So that's what we would call adaptive. And then we talk about maladaptive, which I would say simply it's unhelpful. Maladaptive coping generally increases stress in the long run while being engaged in. So these are things, while maybe in the moment, it may distract you or it might take your mind off things or it might help you feel better for a moment. But when you look back at it, it didn't actually get you closer to where you wanted to be. And you may even be farther, depending on what's going on. I like to give this framework for it because I don't think of things as explicitly good, bad, positive, negative. I think of things as safe and unsafe. I think of things as helpful or unhelpful. I think of things as familiar, or unfamiliar, or comfortable or uncomfortable. Those are terms that I use in the work and the practice that I do. because what might be unhelpful to one person might be helpful to another. So for example, my dad smokes cigarettes. He has, like, my whole life been like fighting him to kind of like been fighting him to not do so for a long time, and he, we're getting there. So for him, like, that's a maladaptive coping mechanism, because for him it's adding to other health challenges. So while in the moment it may help him calm down and it may help him feel a little bit more grounded, in the long term it's still doing damage, and he's feeling worse because of the effects of it. There's another client that I work with that smokes herbal smokes, and for them, they find it to be very helpful. I don't think it has marijuana or nicotine or anything in that, but for them, like, it really helps them like focus on their breath, and like they were able to understand how to actually breathe outside of just their chest, because they were taking deep breaths when they were smoking in that regard. So for them, it's helpful. And so you can see how it's very dynamic. There isn't necessarily a single box that anything falls in for any one person. And overindulgence in something, while it at one point in time may have been helpful, can then be unhelpful, right? So anything that is too much of a thing can also be unhelpful as well. Are my favorite warm chocolate chip cookies maladaptive? The only person who can make that determination is you. I can't tell you if that is helpful or if that's unhelpful for you. That is something that you have to see and determine for yourself. Is it something that you feel like is helpful for you in that moment? Do you feel like it's adding? Do you feel like it's adding then, but it may be causing or like contributing to other issues later on? And
oh, sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
But yeah, I was saying like that is no, I'm never gonna tell you, yeah, that's good, or yeah, or no, that's bad. Like, you are the person who has to kind of like sit and kind of wrestle with that. And the answer will come to you exactly. Like, it's helpful in the moment in moderation, right? I'm not gonna lie to you, I may have eaten a whole sleeve of Oreos like an hour before I hopped on here. In the moment, did it feel good? Heck yeah, it did. But like, I can't be sitting down and having a whole sleeve of Oreos every day. Like, that's just not going to work.
I was gonna say, when she brought up the cookies, it reminded me. So my brother is lactose intolerant, but whenever he feels stressed, he eats ice cream. So yeah, like, it may feel good, it may taste good, but you're gonna be on that toilet for all night, and that's just the price you have to pay.
Kalei, you don't gotta at me so loudly, okay? Like,
That's just the price that I'll pay.
Precisely. Listen, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm getting into. It's my house, and it is what it is. Okay. Any other questions about adaptive, maladaptive, helpful, unhelpful coping? All right. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about my process for getting unstuck. When I have folks who I'm working with who are being like, I don't know, like, I've been using these skills, or I've had these same coping skills for 5 years, and like, they're just not working. Like, it's just not working for me anymore. I don't know what's wrong. Like, I used to feel this way after using it, but now I don't feel that way anymore. Like, what can I do? Right? So this is the process that I'll usually ask them to work through in the moment. So in that moment, really feel where your energy. So let's say something happened. Usually you would use a coping skill, but it hasn't been working in the past. So what do I actually do in that moment? So in that moment, see where your energy is. Is it high, medium, low? You can use the number system that we used earlier. Identify if that feels good to you, comfortable to you, or uncomfortable, not good to you. And then see what is your baseline on a normal, typical, average day when things are going okay, not necessarily great, not necessarily bad, but okay. where are you normally falling on average? And where is that identified? So for example, I had to give this huge presentation and I just gave it and I bombed it. It was awful. It went terribly. And so in that moment, I'm feeling anxious. So my energy is really, really high, right? Usually we'll say my energy is probably like at a 10. Usually I like my energy and it feels comfortable for me when I'm usually around like a 3 or a 4. Okay. So in that moment, my energy is up and I actually want to bring my energy down. So what are the activities that I can do? Remember that word modulation. How can I move my energy from where it is closer to what I want it to be? Sometimes you have to ask yourself, do I have the capacity to actually do this? Because sometimes you don't, and that's okay. So we look at alternative options that may be available that are accessible in that regard, and then complete the practice and then reevaluate where your energy is and repeat as necessary. So I bombed this meeting, I bombed this presentation that I had. My energy is really high. I need to bring it back down. Things that help me bring down my energy are kind of like dispelling the energy from my body. So doing physical exercise or going for a walk or something to help clear my mind is something that'll help take my energy and bring it back down. Then I would ask myself, do I have the time, energy, and capacity to do this? I'm at work. I'm about to go on lunch. So yep, I have some time. Do I have the energy to do so? Yeah, I'm feeling really energetic and I kind of want to get it out. And do I have the capacity to do it? Yep, I can walk. Like I feel well, my legs are working, like I can walk in that regard. Cool. Complete the practice, come back in the office. I'm like, okay, I'm not at a 10, I might be at an 8. So I'm not necessarily back exactly where I want to be, but I'm closer. So you keep using skills until you get back to where you are. And sometimes there aren't enough skills to bring you exactly back down. Sometimes you might just need to go to sleep. Sometimes you might just need a new day in that regard. Sometimes you might need a new week, a new month, a new year, a new season of life. It may not necessarily be something that you can exactly do that'll get you the exact result sometimes, and that's okay. Sometimes it will, and it'll be great, fantastic. I also want to give an example of the reverse. I got into an argument with my partner, and I'm feeling really, really low. Like my energy feels like a -4. And again, I usually like to be at like a 3 or a 4. So my energy is feeling really low and I need to modulate. I need to move my energy up. So what are things that I can do to move my energy up? Again, that could look like exercise, that could look like breath work, that could look like connecting with someone else. So let's say I chose, same thing, I'm going to go for a walk and I'm going to move my energy up. In terms of capacity, time, yep, I have the time to do it. So on the weekend, so I have the time. Do I have the energy and the capacity? I don't actually have the energy to do it. So for whatever reason, I'm just feeling really stuck in bed. I don't really want to deal with it. I just don't want to get up. I just don't have the energy to do so. So at that point in time, you're like, okay, that's not the coping skill that I use right now. It's one that I have, it's something that's available, but it's not good for me right now. So what can I do? If I'm feeling really stuck in bed and I can't really get up, what can I do? And one of the things I love to remind people is like, okay, well, if you need to move your energy up, one of the things you can do is go sit by a window, or you can open a window or go sit by the sun. And those are some of the things that can help bring your energy naturally up, that if you don't have energy to physically go and do something, that you can use as an alternative. Does that process make sense for folks? Okay. Any questions about that process or how to use that process? Okay, cool. So I do want to recognize and honor for respect time. We are creeping on 8:30. So if folks have to go, feel free. It is okay. We're gonna practice 2 modulating activities and then we are gonna bounce. And if you do leave early, you will get access to the recording. So don't worry about that part. But now we're going to practice modulating our energy with two practices that I like. So for this practice, we're going to work to modulate our energy up. Like Corinne said earlier, I love breath work. Breath work is a very easy way that you can modulate and use your energy, in that way. So one of the things that you can do to modulate your energy up is with breath work is to move your breath fast, right? So faster breathing will build more energy and will bring your energy up. Okay. So we're going to practice something called the lion's breath. It is one of my favorites. It is also very silly, but it brings your energy up if your energy is feeling really low. So how you practice this, it's really simple. We'll practice it together. Sit in a way that feels comfortable to you. Try and place both of your feet flat on the floor if you can. We're going to exhale all of the air out. Take a fresh inhale here through your nose or your mouth, whichever you prefer, filling yourself up. And when you exhale, you're going to stick your tongue out and breathe out like a dragon. It may sound really silly. It may feel kind of silly, but the goal is to try and vibrate like that back part palate of your breath. Some people recognize it from the Ujjayi breath from yoga, or you can just stick your tongue out and be like Adam Sandler and be like, wah, same difference. So we're going to take another breath. We're going to practice 5 rounds of that breath and just see how we feel. So exhale all the air out. Inhale in, tongue out. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Breathe in. Breathe out. Last one. Fill up and let go. So again, you might already start feeling a little hot, a little flush in the face, maybe even. But that breath is really practicing modulating your energy up because you're breathing in and out at a more rapid rate. You like it? It's a great one to keep in your toolbox. I love it. So now that we brought ourselves up, let's also bring ourselves back down because I want to get you back to where you came from. So for modulating out, again, we'll use breath work because you can do whatever you can with the breath and the body you got. And so we're going to practice what we call hand breathing. It's really simple. You take your finger at the bottom. Usually you start at the pinky. And as you trace your finger up, you're going to inhale, you'll hold at the top. As you exhale, you'll hold at the bottom. As well, I think it's really funny because now it's going to think that we're all holding our hands up for Zoom because, Zoom is really funky now. They're doing, AI stuff. But we are going to breathe up for a count of 4. We'll hold for a count of 4. We'll exhale for a count of 4, and we'll hold for a count of 4. It's also similar to square breathing if you're familiar with that as well. So again, we're going to inhale 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, fill up, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, let go, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, let go, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Last breath, inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, let go. 2, 3, 4, hold, or not. So that breath should be a little bit more calming. It's a steady breath. You're using the same amount of time for your exhales, your inhales, and your holds, which helps your body regulate and kind of calm back down. So that's a way to use modulation to bring your energy up or bring your energy down. Any questions about modulation? Cool. Well, thank you for coming and being with us today. Thank you for showing up and showing out for you. Donations are welcome as well that are available here. They'll also be emailed for you tomorrow. Any questions, any comments, any concerns, any queries, any qualms, any conundrums, any testimonials? I'm going to stop this recording too, so we can do that. Oh, no.